You know, who we are and how we are really compilations of things that have happened to us in life. How we were raised kind of makes us who we are. If some of us in here have had traumatic events or lots of traumatic events, that will affect who we are and how we are. Maybe you were sheltered as a kid. That will certainly affect you. Maybe you had to fend for yourself. That will affect you as well. I'm certainly a product of how I was raised, but I know for me at least, I'm also a product of the things that people said to me. That over the course of my life, there's been maybe a handful of things that have been said to me that really have motivated me to become the person that I have become. One of those that I want to share with you this morning is something that was said to me 40 years ago. And if you've been a part of the church for a while, you've probably heard me say this. Every maybe few years or so, I might bring this story back up when it's appropriate. But when I was in middle school, we moved to Texas, and that was a difficult move. We actually lived in Arizona for 2 years before we moved to Texas, but basically it was this New York family coming to Texas 40 years ago. And back then it was a lot different than it is now. Back then they weren't real happy when people from, well, not that they are nowadays, but when people from New York move here. But even more so then, because that was before Texas just became this place that people from all over the country have flocked to. And so, and culturally, it was so different, right? And I didn't like it. I was in middle school. It was not a good experience at all. But there was one good experience when we moved to, it was South Fort Worth. The church that my mom took me to, it was a great experience. And so I hated being in Texas. I hated the school that I was in, but I loved going to church. And so on a Wednesday, probably after only being here like 4 or 5, 6 weeks, my mom took me to church for confirmation. And as I was walking up the parking lot after she dropped me off, there's this kid that was playing basketball, a little outdoor hoop. He didn't go to that church, but he went to my middle school, and he recognized me. And I don't remember the exact words of what he said, but it's kind of like, oh, here comes the church boy. He called me a church boy, I believe. And instinctively, when he said that, I wanted to deflect that. And here's what's crazy is this was 40 years ago in Texas, the Bible Belt. I think everyone was Christian back then, right, compared to now. So I can only imagine what it might be like now. But when he said that, instinctively, reflexively, I denied it. I said, no, I'm not a church boy. I'm only here because my mom makes me. And no sooner did I say that my mom makes me, I just felt this guilt and this remorse, because I knew nothing could be further from the truth. It was the one place that I really enjoyed coming. I had a really close relationship with God even back then, and I knew I shouldn't have said what I said. Now, I don't know, I might not have known all the Bible passages back then, but I certainly knew many of them. The first one that kind of comes to mind in situations like that is Romans 1:16, which says, "For I'm not ashamed of the gospel." You see, in 7th grade, I was ashamed of the gospel. And sometimes even as churchgoers and if people of faith, when we're with the wrong people and when we're in the wrong environment, we can be ashamed of the gospel when we shouldn't be. Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power of God that will bring salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. I'm not sure if I knew that passage in 7th grade, but I know I knew this one. Matthew 10:32-33. "Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge." This is Jesus saying this. "If you acknowledge me before others, I will also acknowledge you before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven." I knew that passage as a 7th grader, and I vowed that never again, if put in that situation where I'd be tempted to be ashamed of the gospel, that I would never fail that test again. And 40 years later, it still motivates me to this day. So we're going to do a 3-week message series on sharing our faith in evangelism, and it's called Not Ashamed, because God calls for us to not be ashamed of the gospel. You know, it's kind of crazy. You know, we're sitting here this morning, we're singing our praises to God, God, we're hearing this message that I'm giving. And what's crazy about it is like in 2,000 years, Christianity comes upon this earth and becomes the largest religion on the face of the earth in just 2,000 years. And it starts out with Jesus and 12 ordinary people. And I don't even like saying 12 ordinary people. He chose 12, but one of them he chose for the specific purpose of betraying him. So like he didn't really bring anything to the effort. So Jesus with just 11 ordinary people come on the scene 2,000 years ago. And over the course of 2,000 years, it becomes the largest religion on the face of the earth. How and why? Because for Jesus' followers and the people that came after them, they weren't ashamed of the gospel. In fact, they were proud of it. They believed in it, and they were willing to die for their faith. Now, if you think where we're at in 2022 with Christianity, especially in America, that's not the same story. In fact, how is it that, as the message of Christ moved, that Europe became largely, almost completely Christian, and now we look back at Europe and Christianity is such a small minority there. It's mainly more cultural Christians that observe certain holidays than people who really believe. And here in America, you always hear me, make comments about the fact that Christianity is really slipping here in America, and it is. When I started out as a pastor, the majority of people in America were Christians, and that was just 25 years ago. Let alone if you go back 50 years ago, it wasn't even close. But right now in 2022, the majority of Americans, aren't Christian. How can that be? Well, because we got a lot of people who are ashamed of the gospel. They're not comfortable with what the Bible says, and so they either don't believe it or they change it around a little bit. And they're not proud of it. They're not sure that they even believe it. And they're not certainly willing to die for it. And this is the world in which now we live. But you see, when Jesus walked this earth, he gave a command to his followers that was to be given for generations to come, even to our very day. And it comes from Acts chapter 1, verses 7 to 8. Jesus replied, "It's not for you to know the times or the seasons that the Father has fixed by his own authority." And Jesus is leaving, and what he's telling his followers and what he's telling Christians to come for generations, that it's not for you to know the times or the dates that the Father's going to send the Son back. But I promise you this, if you turn on the radio after 10 o'clock tonight, AM or FM, that's the message that you're going to hear, is some pastor talking about the end and when the end might be coming and how close we are, or this or this, that. Jesus says it's not for you to know. Why do we as a church fixate on when the end's going to come when Jesus himself says, I don't even know when it is? So Jesus, before going into heaven, is telling the church not to do what the church obsesses about, and that's kind of like fixating on when the end's going to come. But this is what Jesus tells the church to do, what he tells his disciples to do. He says, but you're going to receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you. And you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And just stop right there for a second, because this is why you have to understand the Bible always in context. What we sit there and we read what God says to Israel, and it's like, this is God saying it to me. No, he's saying it to Israel. He might say, God might say something to David, and you think he's saying it to you. He's not. When you read Scripture, you need to understand, who God's speaking to, because if God's speaking to you here, all of us have to book a ticket to Jerusalem. But that's not what we're to do. He's telling his followers, you're to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. That's not what he's telling you and I to do. So stop reading the Bible like God's speaking to you. I mean, he is, but in a general sense, and in these specifics, he's speaking also to people, and you have to understand it within the context. So the saying that he speaks to his disciples, he still is speaking to us, but we don't start in Jerusalem, we start in Fort Worth. And then we go out to Texas, and then we go out to the United States, and then we go out to the ends of the world. But it starts in Fort Worth, and here's the problem, is when it comes to like sharing our faith, we don't even really understand what Fort Worth is. It's not that Jesus is calling you to go downtown and do ministry. I mean, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not like he's calling you to go down to the south side. You can, but he's not telling you to. Where's Fort Worth? It's in your home. That you're to be my witnesses in your home, because most of us right now in 2022, we live in homes where not everyone believes. And even if they believe in your immediate home, when you look at your extended family, your parents, your grandparents, brothers, sisters, or whatever, everyone almost in this day and age have people in their immediate homes or extended homes that don't believe. And Jesus says, you're to be my witnesses in your home. And after your home, it's in your neighborhood. Fort Worth is like your neighbors, right? It's not going to the south side. If you count 3 homes to your left and if you count 3 homes to your right, I guarantee you in 2022, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 of those people who don't believe. And so you have to be God's witness in your home. You got to be God's witness in your neighborhood and in your workplace. Now, as a pastor, I spend most of my time around people who do believe, right? I spend most of my hours working at the church, and when I'm not working at the church, a lot of times I'm out doing things with people from church. And so it's always been really important for me to at least have something in my life that takes me outside of the church community. So for 12 years, as my kids were growing up, I coached YMCA soccer. In the neighborhood in which I live now and the one that I lived before it, I was on the HOA board for much of the time that I lived in this home, in my previous home. I've played indoor soccer on an adult team as long as I've been an adult. And in all of those situations, I'm happy to say, people from the HOA board have come to the church and visit church. People from my adult soccer team have come to the church and visited the church. From coaching the kids in YMCA soccer, they have come, and I've baptized at least 1, if not 2 kids. And so where is Fort Worth? Fort Worth starts in your home because you have loved ones who need to hear about Jesus, and then your neighborhood, and then your work, and then the community in which you engage. This is what God calls us to. Now, that message from Jesus to his disciples was given 2,000 years ago. And here's the deal. The message doesn't change. People try to change the message because they do become ashamed of the gospel. And so churches have, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about that, but the message should not change. It's an unchanging message that you're a sinner, but yet you're God's child, and he loved you so much that he sent Jesus Christ into the world to die for you. That gospel never changes, but how we tell it does change. Because 2,000 years ago, when Jesus told his disciples to take this message to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, you did it by foot. Or if you could afford one, maybe an animal you could ride on. But that's why when we look at the Apostle Paul, he did these 3 or 4 missionary journeys in which he's literally walking thousands of miles telling people about Jesus, because that's how you did it back then. And he ultimately brought that message to a place called Rome that ended up killing him. But eventually that place called Rome ended up making it their state national religion, and they took that message out to the rest of Europe. And then when Europe was kind of curious about what was going on, the rest of the world, and if there was a rest of the world, then all of a sudden they're taking that message to the New World, and people are fleeing religious persecution, and they take it to the New World, and then the New World, which we're a part of, becomes Christian, and then we're oh yeah, and so they did it by boat rather than by foot. And then then in the New World, we're man, but we forgot all these other parts, and so we do it by plane, and we send missionaries to all these different parts of the world, right? And now in 2022, it's crazy in that we can take that message to the rest of the world without even leaving our house because of technology. But here's the crazy thing is that message of Christ has kind of been spreading across the globe and so forth. In the backyard, it's been faltering. It's faltering, as I spoke about, in Europe. It's been faltering in the United States, and even in our families, right? Some people aren't believing. And even worse, even within Christianity, the message is getting lost. And I talked about this a lot last week, and I want to touch on it a little bit more, because you need to understand that there's pseudo churches out there, there's fake churches out there, there's fake Christians out there that pretend to be Christian, but they're really not. And so when Jesus says you're to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth, he really means in your family. And in today's context, he even means amongst people who think they're Christian. I talked about it last week that the United Methodist Church right now at this very moment, and churches all across this country, they're voting. Are we going to be a part of a church body that holds to God's word is what we submit to, that we're all sinners and that the only way that we're saved is through the blood of Jesus Christ and that he calls us obedience to his word? Or are we going to just go in this direction in which what we determine is right and wrong is that we're really not that bad people, God loves all people, and society will determine what's right and what's wrong? I mean, they're literally splitting over that. And they're not the only ones. The Episcopalians have, the Lutherans have, the Presbyterians have. I mean, all the major denominations have split as they've tried to determine if God's going to be the source of what they believe and what they teach, or if this world's going to be. But you see, that's not just the only way in how there's churches out there that claim to be Christian that aren't Christian. We see this in like a lot of the large, successful, many times non-denominational churches. They're not a lot better. Because you see, there's a formula by which you can cause your church to grow. Just like on the radio, like all the songs kind of last the same amount of time, and there's just kind of a formula by which, music becomes successful. There's not a lot of variety in terms of length and just styles and so forth. The same thing's true in the church. Like, you do X number of songs and that's all you do. You start low, you bring them high, or you start high, you bring them low. The pastor gives messages, they're supposed to be just this long, and if they're too short, then that doesn't really attract. If they're too long, that doesn't attract. And what really works when it comes to messages in these churches, and this is what they do, is like what are called heartfelt messages. And what's a heartfelt message? It's a message that will pull on your heartstring. So like life and health issues are heartfelt. Families, watch it. Like every major non-denominational church in the next week or two are going to be doing a message series that have to do with families. Because everyone's got family drama and stuff like that, and people want to hear it. They'll do messages on marriage. They'll do message on success. 7 keys to this and 5 keys to that. You see, that's the formula that works. You tug on their heartstrings, you kind of make it a self-help, a how-to, an inspirational type message series, and they'll flock to it. And this is what the church has become. You know what? One of the biggest problems in Christianity in 2022 is like, there are so many denominations. Now, we're all Christian, but amongst Christianity, there's denominations, right? It's their own flavor of how they understand the Bible. I could probably name 10, and you can probably name 5. But the problem is we don't know how many denominations there are. If you were to go to Wikipedia right now, it would say there's 1,100 Christian denominations. 1,100. I can't conceive that. But if you go to the World Christian Database, it says that there are 9,000 Christian denominations. And if you go to the Center for Study of Global Christianity, it will say there's 34,200 Christian denominations. The problem in the church is we don't know if there's 1,000 different denominations or there's 34,000. No one knows. Why? Because every Tom, Dick, and Harry can start their own church and make it a denomination. And there's no accountability to what they teach and even the education and what the pastors know. And they all claim to be Christian, and it just destroys Christianity with this fragmentation. You see, gone are the days, and listen, I'm not here to say the Catholic style isn't open to abuse. It is, but not like the evangelical style. Because see, this is how the Catholic style does it, and it was the only game in town before 1500. So it works like this. You got priests, or a pastor, to put it in an evangelical context. So you got these priests, and what governs what the priests say and don't say? They've got ecclesiastical, big word, supervisors that keep them in check, and those are called bishops. And a bishop is going to be over a certain number of priests. And now, who keeps those bishops in check? Well, then they put archbishops, and the archbishops will keep the bishops in check, and the bishops are keeping the priests in check. And who keeps the archbishop in check? Well, the Pope. Now, mind you, when a bad teaching comes in there, and the Catholics, when they're only the game in town, they went awry, it's really hard to fix that when the whole system's corrupt like that. But our answer for that on the evangelical side, where everyone can start their own denomination, stinks. And you end up getting a bunch of churches and a bunch of denominations that don't even teach God's truth. I'm going to share with you some statements, and I want you to understand these statements in terms of who we are as Americans and who we are as Christians in America. The first one is this, and this survey was done like less than a year ago. I think it was like 6 months ago. And the first statement that they want people's response on is, and it would be interesting to even have us be able to vote before I tell you the answer, but Jesus was a great teacher, but he wasn't God. 52% of Americans believe that Jesus wasn't God. I'm telling you, we don't live in a Christian nation because the majority of Americans don't even know that Jesus is God. But here's the scary part. Evangelicals are the cream of the crop of Christians. In other words, we're not counting liberal Christians who dismiss the Bible. Evangelicals, you have to say that you believe that the Bible is the Word of God. You got to be going to church at least a couple times a month or whatever like the requirements are. These are the cream of the crop of believers, are evangelicals. A third of the cream of the crop of Christians in America don't even realize that Jesus was God. Listen, the Bible says he's the Son of God. Now, last time I checked, the son of something is something. If you're the son of God, you're God. If you're the son of a donkey, you're a donkey. If you're the son of a camel, you're a camel. He's the Son of God. That is by definition what makes a group Christian, is to believe that Jesus is God. And for a third of the most devout Christians in this country, we don't even understand that. The Bible, next phrase, like all sacred writings, contains helpful accounts of ancient myths, but it's not literally true. Half of America believes that the Bible is just ancient myths that aren't literally true. This is why our country is no longer Christian, because they don't believe that the Bible speaks truth. It's just myths. Religious belief is a matter of personal opinion, and it's not about objective truth. 54% of Americans believe that the Bible isn't about objective truth. In fact, no religious writing's about objective truth. In fact, they would deny that there's objective truth. This is a country we live. 25 years ago when I was a pastor, you would not have seen this stuff. This is a new phenomenon in our country because our country's dying, and our country's dying because the church stinks, and the church stinks because we don't even know how many denominations there are. Maybe 34,000. Scary. But that's just this country. Let's go back to this evangelical thing. Let's talk about the cream of the crop of the Christians. Look at this statement. Everyone sins a little, but most people are good by nature. Half of evangelicals, half of the cream of the crop of Christians believe that people are mostly good by nature. If you believe that, then you don't understand the depravity of sin. You don't understand that even our good deeds, we're told by Scripture, are like filthy rags before God. We're not primarily good people. That's why Jesus had to come into this world. We're like, God alone is good. In fact, Jesus is one time referred to by someone. They said, good teacher. And Jesus is like, why do you call me good teacher? Only God in heaven's good. Now, if Jesus won't ascribe the title good, you think you and I should? Well, for half of evangelicals, we think so. God accepts the worship of all religions, including Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Half of all evangelicals, the cream of the crop, thinks that God accepts like the worship of all religions. Do you read the Bible? Do they read the Bible? Where do you see that? There's a story where like Moses leads Israel out of Egypt, and as he leads them out of Egypt, he's gone up a mountain for a really long time. The people are like, where'd he go? I don't know. Hey, maybe we should build an image of the God that like brought us out of Egypt. They did this like calf looking thing. It really ticked God off. It didn't turn out well for them. God's not, even when there's a smattering of who the one true God is in there, God wasn't like, you know what, they meant well by making me a calf. God's not like, they meant well leaving my son out. It doesn't work that way. But for half of evangelicals, we kind of think so. You know, gone are the days in which you open a phone book, sorry, only over 30. Gone are the days you open a phone book, you're like, hey, there's a church, well, let's try that. It's not too far away. And you can expect to show up and that it is solid Christianity. Those days are gone. If you're under 30, gone are the days in which you get in front of your computer and you Google a church, and it pulls up and it's just a few blocks away, and you try it and you expect it's going to turn out well. It's not that way anymore. There's apparently 30-some thousand Christian denominations. People are making this up as they go, and our teachings stink. Because we're too busy talking about, how to have the greatest family or most success in life than we are actually preaching the Word of God. And what's crazy is like when Jesus says you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth, now if he was writing it to us, he's going to say you have to be my witnesses in church. Because many churches have lost what the true gospel is as well. And this is where you and I come in. So here we are 2,000 years after the time of Christ. We're hearing this message. It's the truth of what Scripture says. And how do we get here? Well, we get here because you know what? Jesus said something to his followers, and his followers believed it. They weren't ashamed of the gospel. They were willing to die for it, and they all did. And so did their followers, and so did their followers. And this continues across a generation for 2,000 years until it got to the point of your great-grandparent. And your great-grandparent thought enough about it that they were willing to teach your grandparent about it. And your grandparent were willing to teach your parent about it, and your parents or your grandparents, they would bring you to the church so that you can learn the truth. Your parents and your grandparents, when you're a kid and they laid you down at night, would sit there and lay with you in bed or sit by the side of the bed, and they would read with you out of the children's Bible that someone gave you. This is how we have the true church today. And this is what God calls you and I to do as well. Literally millions of people have given their lives so that we could have the true gospel and that we wouldn't be ashamed of it. And in the same way that it was dependent upon Jesus' disciples and their followers and their followers and their followers, it's dependent upon us, and it's dependent upon our children. It's dependent upon our children's children. How do we do that? Well, first, you've got to know God's story. I mean, how are you supposed to engage like your parents, your children, your in-laws, your brother, your sister, your uncle, your nephew? How are you supposed to engage them in a conversation about God if you don't even know who God is? Here's the crazy thing. If I said in Abilene, Texas, God's going to be speaking, we would be stupid to not get in our car and drive to Abilene, Texas to hear God speaking. Why wouldn't you do it? But we're not willing to open our Bible. We're not willing to read our Bible daily, which is the Word of God. Well, if you don't read the Word of God, how do you know His voice? So we got to start you got to know who God is. But then secondly, you got to know your story because, God's got his story and he tells it, but how do you tie into it? I talked to someone after second service and she came up to me and said, I really struggle because I don't really have a story and because my story is just I was just kind of raised in the church. I'm like, that's part of my story. I don't remember when God wasn't my God. I don't remember a time that I wasn't close with him, and that's just part of my story. That's a story right there. You got to have a story. You got to know why you have a story. 1 Peter 3:15 says this, but in your hearts, sanctify Christ as Lord, always being prepared to give a defense to everyone who asks you the reason for the hope that is in you. You have to be always prepared to say why it is you even believe. And if you don't know why it is you believe, then you really don't. And you got to back that bus up. But look, it says respond in gentleness and respect. And this is where some of us stink. There's idiots in this world. There's people who believe this. There's people who deny this, and we just look down on them, and we can be very condescending to them. We can lack respect for people of other races. We can lack respect of people of other social economic status. We can lack respect of people of different education. But you know what? You need to know who Jesus is. You need to know how his story ties to you, and do it in gentleness and respect. And now when we do that, you can do that two ways. You can do it the traditional way and you can do it the 2022 way. The traditional way is that you speak it to your family, you speak it to your neighbors, you speak it to your coworkers. The traditional way is the best way to kind of share Christ with someone is when someone's going through a really hard time, that's when they're willing to receive it. I've shared with you the story that when my dad was dying just a few weeks before his death, he had been kind of a so-so Christian and not great Christian his whole life, and he was really anxious a couple weeks before he died. And I said, Dad, you were raised in the church, you were baptized, this, God loves you, you're a child, and he'll be there with you even when it's time for you to die. And he's just this calmness comes upon him. He's like, thanks, that helps a lot. When we sense people are in difficult times, they need that hope and they need that encouragement, and that's the time in which we need to share the message. When's the last time you've invited someone to church? I'm trying to be clear, many churches think nowadays, not all churches, but many of them do. That's why Christians believe the crazy stuff that they do. And so if we actually are a church that speaks the truth, why aren't we inviting people to church? When's the last time you invited someone to church? And some of us are like, God will take care of that. But you know what? He will, but he needs you, and he requires you to do it as well. Look at Romans 10:13-15. Paul says this: now everyone who calls on God's going to be saved. Our goal is to have our family, our friends, our coworkers, whoever, we want them to call on God because they'll be saved. But Paul says, how can they call on one whom they haven't believed? You can't call on someone you can't believe. And he goes on and says, well, how can they believe if they haven't heard? And how can they hear without someone to tell them? And how can someone preach and how can someone tell them unless they've been sent? That is the story I read to you in Acts. Jesus sent his disciples, and they sent their followers, and they sent their followers for generation upon generation upon generation to you and I, who have also been sent, not to Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, to the ends of the earth, but we've been sent to our homes and to our neighbors and to our coworkers. And then there's that 2022 way. I said the message, the gospel doesn't change, but the way that we share it does. And we are living in unique times. Because of technology and social media, we can spread the message of Jesus Christ in a way that they could never have dreamt of. We can do it without leaving our own house. And we need to understand that, not that we don't do it the old ways, but there's a new way that God's called us to as well with technology. About a year and a half ago, I got this email from an elderly man in Austin. And he shared with me his story that he wasn't a part of a church, and he was old, and he was homebound, and he wanted to be a part of a church before he died, and he wanted to be part of ours. And at first I'm like, yeah, you know what? Why don't you try to find a church in Austin? There's churches there. Certainly there's some good ones there. Try to find a church there that will kind of minister to you. And he didn't want to. He wanted to be a part of this church. And I thought, well, how cool is that in today's day and age? An old man who's no longer able to get out of his house can choose to be a part of Light of the World and can be a member of Light of the World and still never even be able to attend here. He just watches it. And so I eventually said, yeah, go for it. Yeah, absolutely. And he filled out the paperwork and he joined. I don't know if he's still alive now, and I won't know when he dies. But for him, it was important to be a part of a church when he died, and he was part of a church that he believed in and wanted to be a part of. And I think that's kind of cool. Technology allows that to happen. I've got family members that watch Light of the World. I've got other staff members who have family members that watch Light of the World. I've got members who have family members that watch Light of the World. Listen, there's a lot of churches that stink nowadays. You've got people in your family who might be pseudo-Christians, fake Christians. Maybe they go to a church or they don't go really often. They believe some stuff or whatever. Well, here's your opportunity. We live in an age of technology. Why aren't you telling them, you know what, why don't you check out my church? The pastor's got a big mouth. But he speaks the truth, right? Why don't you try out my church? They got a service at 8:30 and 9:45 and 11. And at least then when you don't go, or just listen to what he's saying, because that sounds a little different than your church. Why aren't we spreading that message? It was, crazy what technology was able to do. And I saw this during COVID. You see, I've always had the desire to try to get the word out to as many people as possible. Whenever I preach on evangelism, I get very passionate, and I almost beg and plead like I am right now. Listen, we got to be doing this. We got to be doing this. I've tried all kinds of different advertising campaigns. Listen, I've even tried the gimmick things. Everything that I could to try to get the word about church out to the community and to invite people in. But something weird happened during COVID. And during COVID, it's I wasn't even trying to do any of that. And all of a sudden, every Sunday, 9 or 10 first-time new families are coming in week after week after week. And I'm not doing anything. I'm not putting any advertising out. I'm not doing anything. But suddenly, social media, everyone's talking about Light of the World. Because the Light of the World was doing things that other churches weren't. And I swear to you, I might be exaggerating, but I don't think I am. I think for a whole year, like every conversation I had with someone, when they found out I was a pastor and I said, I'm pastor of Light of the World, they were like, oh, I've heard of that church. I kid you not. I remember calling a doctor's office for my hand surgery in South Fort Worth. 20 miles away from here. Oh, I heard about that church. Oh, I'm by your church. And for a whole year, getting my hair cut. Oh, yeah, I heard about your church. Drive by your church all the time. Listen, until that point, for 20 years, every time I said I was a pastor and someone said, where's your church? I'd be like, North Riverside Drive. I'm not sure where that is. Across from the police station. Oh, is there a church there? There's a senior center there. Yeah, I remember that, but there's a church. Like no one knew. And for that year, it's like everyone knew. And by the way, we're back to every time I tell people I'm a pastor and they say, where? They're like, there's a church there? But listen, if people were excited about what we had to offer during the time when that was not what everyone else was doing, now more than ever, when churches aren't teaching the truth and doing all these things, why aren't we getting excited about it now? Like all y'all were like live streaming the services, you're hosting, Facebook watch parties and doing this. Listen, most churches nowadays, a lot of churches nowadays aren't willing to speak the truth. People don't even understand what true Christianity is. Why aren't we putting that stuff out? If you're on social media, and I'm not, but if you're on social media, you know what? If I say something that's impactful, put it out there on your feed. Because in 2022, that's one of the ways that we share the good news and the truth, and we even invite people to church. Now, I'm not big into social media, but I am into reviews. And something interesting happened last week, and that is someone came for church, and when they came, they looked at the Yelp reviews first. Now, at that time, we only had 2 Yelp reviews. Now, I'm not a big fan of Yelp reviews. I'm more of a Google person, but I'm going to tell you that in a second. But one of the Yelp reviews apparently wasn't good at all, Joe said. It was 1 star, but one was 5 star, and the 5 star said, the pastor always speaks his mind, and he's not afraid to tell the truth. And I'm here to tell you, if I die before you, that's what I want on my tombstone, is he wasn't afraid to speak the truth. Because I can get behind that. And that's what we should be getting behind as a people. Now, I'm not a big Yelp fan, but I am a big Google fan. I don't do business with anyone without looking at the Google review. And I don't want a business that has 4 Google reviews, because that's the owner, his wife, and their aunt and uncle or something, right? I want a business that has 100 or more Google reviews. And I need 4 stars or better, and I prefer 4.5 stars or better. Why? It doesn't have to be perfect, because some people you can't please. But if the majority of the people are saying this is a credible place, a good place, whether it's an attorney, whether it's a plumber, whatever it is, then that's who I want to do business with. You know what? I'm the same way with churches. If I'm going to be out of town and I'm going to spend my Sunday going to a different church, I don't want to go to a church that's got 7 Google reviews. I'm expecting there might be 15 people there, and it might be a little weird. I want a church that's going to at least have 100 Google reviews, and I want it to be 4.5 stars or better. When people tell me that they're moving, and they're moving across the country, and they're like, Pastor Greg, do you know of a church? Of course I don't, but what I'll do is I'll say, where are you moving? And I'll start researching the churches. Once again, before I even get to their website, I'm going to look to see who has 100 or plus Google reviews, and how many of them are at least 4.5 stars or better. It's just how we do it. And it's such an easy way to get word out this day and age. At the start of this morning, I think we had 45, which isn't bad for a church our size, but we got to get it over 100. Now, here's what I'm asking as we're kicking off the series this morning. I'm asking first and foremost that you share Christ with your family, because we all have people in our family who aren't believers, or they're believing something that they really shouldn't. I'm asking you that you do that to your neighbors. I ask that you do that to your community. I ask that you invite people to church, because how can they believe if they're not invited? How can they come if they're not asked? And I'm asking you to, on your social media, to put word out there. Yeah, you're going to get abused, especially when they hear some of the things that I say. You're going to get lots of abuse, but you remember, you're not ashamed of the gospel, right? The last thing I'm asking you to do, and I'm asking you to do it before you leave this morning, because otherwise I know you won't, and it so happens I'm doing this on the day that I'm giving everyone free cotton candy, by the way, okay? So There's a link in your insert in the bulletin. There's a QR code. I'd ask that you spend 2 or 3 minutes before you leave to hit that QR code with your phone, or you can do it up there. There's an opportunity to leave a Google review or a Facebook review or a Yelp review. Tell them why you come to the Light of the World. And if you don't like this church, please don't leave a review. But if you do, put that out there, because having fancy websites are great, but I never make it to the fancy website till I first see that there's a lot of people that go there that speak highly of the place. So if you don't mind, we're just right on time right now, spending 2 or 3 minutes. I prefer Google, but if you want to be an overachiever, Facebook and Yelp as well, leave a review for this church. If there's anything weighing heavily on your heart or mind, we'll have a prayer partner in the back, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you.